Hello?
You guys to speak closely. We have old microphones like this.
Yeah.
I think they just.
Good afternoon, everybody. That's better cleanup on that one. Yeah. Thank you.
He's breaking.
We'll be sharing this microphone again. I hope not for too long. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. What I'd like to do is bring ourselves into order. And we're expecting 2 more board members to show up, but we don't have a quorum so far to officially run the meeting as indicated in our agenda, but at the same time we're going to be breaking off and getting some information items that we don't have to take a ruling on, make a ruling on. Okay? I want us to have the Pledge of Allegiance, and may we have somebody from up here to lead the pledge. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barnes. And at this point, can we go over to the informational items? So move.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. President, Ms. Barnes, audience. We're going to proceed with informational items, hoping that we may have quorum in the next few minutes. As requested by the Board of Education, this item was placed in this special session. I said Trustee Hoffman requested the item, dual immersion and brain research. So I would like to invite the Director of Bilingual Minor Education, Mary Preacher. She and her staff prepared this presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, trustees and superintendent. My name, as you said, is Mary Preacher, and I'm the Director of Bilingual Migrant and Early Childhood Programs here in the district. And this evening, I'm going to present along with Ms. Rosa Molina, who is the Executive Director of the National Association, the Association of Two-Way and Dual Language Education. It's a national organization. They used to be falling under the umbrella of Two-Way CABE, but because they work with districts all over the country, they created their own organization to be able to support dual language programs across the United States. So I'm going to start first a quick introduction myself because we both have expertise and background in this subject. I was fortunate as a child to be a product of a bilingual program and had the opportunity to study K through 8th in a 50-50 model and then take AP classes as a 9th grader. And as on another viewpoint, so I've studied the subject immensely in school. I was a product, and it's always been a very natural thing for me, that bilingual education. And the other thing is my daughter, my oldest daughter, who is now in college, was one of the first students in one of our district's first dual immersion programs. So from a couple of different lenses, I have experience. So obviously I'm biased towards the program, but I'm putting that out there now. And then I want Rosa to introduce herself.
A question, Ms. Preacher, which languages were you in dual immersion?
It was actually French and English, and we started a 3rd language in 5th grade and a 4th.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Yes. Good evening, board members, President Garcia, and board member Janet Barnes, Superintendent. It's my pleasure to be here with you this evening and talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing across the country and the implementation of powerful two-way and dual language programs. This is my 30th year in two-way immersion. I started when I was 12. No, I'm joking. But I feel like I've been doing this a long time, my entire career. And we started out the program we were one of the first 4 programs in the state of California. that started the implementation of two-way in San Jose, San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, and Santa Monica, Malibu were the first 4 programs in the state. We are now up to 259 programs in 2015, with about 10 new programs growing each year, which is a very interesting dynamic in our school districts. We have probably 2/3 of the counties in California that now have two-way and dual language programs in place. And it is my honor to be in front of you very closely with the task force here as we begin to put together the master plan for the pathways for the two-way programs, not only from the elementary level, but talking about middle school implementation, and hope to impact policy at the high school level as well, as students move through our system and up into the high school. We'll talk a lot about brain research and about the benefits and the rationale for implementation, but I also want you to have a picture that this is not a 1-year process or 3-year process. This process is multi-year and requires us to really think deeply about the goals that we set forth for the students of our program. So Salinas Elementary does the foundational work in establishing biliteracy. It is one thing to talk about children as bilingual children. It's another thing to ensure that children are literate in 2 languages. So literacy in 2 languages is the ultimate goal for us, and hoping that by the time they reach high school, as a result of the seal of biliteracy, students will meet the requirements for their seal and on their high school diplomas, and receive college credit for the work that they have been doing, and possibly enter a 3rd language option or enter coursework where they're using Spanish for special purposes. Spanish for legal medical translation, for example. Those are the types of courses that are being developed all over the country for students who have implemented these or have been part of these programs. 97% of the students who are part of these programs are studying Spanish, Spanish-English, but we do have Mandarin programs that are being developed. Oak Grove School District is considering both Spanish and Vietnamese. And we, in order to have a two-way, you need to have native speakers of the language as well as English-speaking children who are going to cross-learn the language with the native speakers. And so we're very careful about how we implement these, but we've had a lot of success in Korean, in Japanese, in Russian up in Alaska, and also in the Pacific Northwest, as well as this vast majority of programs that are Spanish-English. So for us, as we kind of, you want to go through it?
No, I know she has so much information, so the sticker to a PowerPoint is going to be very difficult.
I'm so sorry.
Listen, no, you're fine. Just keep going beside it.
Yes, I will try to move through this quickly and not take up too much of your time. But our message today is a really important one in that K-12 schools and higher education institutions must be the solution to our national language gap. There are many students who study languages much too late in their schooling, and as a result are not proficient enough to use it in the public workplace. Our goal is to develop high levels of proficiency so students, so it basically alters worldview as well as allows students a skill set that will help them in their careers and in their schooling at the university and college levels. So Arnie Duncan talks a lot about the Department of Education's role in supporting second language instruction, knowing that if we start early enough with children, that we can ensure the students are become incredible natural language learners all the way through their high school. So, you go.
Okay, we'll just switch back. I believe, as Rosa said, the program we're here to talk about tonight is the dual immersion program. And unlike many of the bilingual programs that used to exist here in the state of California and here in our district, those were programs that were only designed to support English learners. The difference with that and the other programs that we had, the transitional, the late exit, those types of programs, this bilingual program is a program integrating native English speakers, I believe as Rosa already said, along with English learners. And in our case, given our demographics, where 98% of our English learners in the district have Spanish as their home language, It's actually 98 point something, but 98%. We do have 21 languages represented in our district, but as you can see, those numbers are rather insignificant when you're talking about 1 or 2 speakers of different languages. And we do have, just again, a little frame of reference for you, our district has over 59% of the students are considered active English learners, with about another 8% are students who have reclassified and have exited the EL status. So this program, the dual immersion program, is a program that can serve all of our students, and then again, using the target language of Spanish, because that is the resource we have readily available to us here in this city. Just play it along with that.
All right. So in order to have a two-way program, as we said before, we have to have speakers of the language combined with English fluent students who want to learn the language as well. In order to call it a two-way immersion process, you need to have peer models of the language working with students to share language and to correct language and to build accent and to build understanding of the language, as well as have the teacher, which is one way, and as well as have the teacher doing formal instruction in the language as part of the academic program. That's the second way. That's why it's called two-way. The language involves periods of time where only one language is used. There is a clear separation of language so that students have a need to use the language as they're working with their teacher. We have found after years of research in bilingual delivery that when teachers break code or switch languages back and forth during instruction, that your Spanish dominant children tune out and they wait until instruction is given to them in Spanish with very little learning of the English instruction. And English speakers do the same thing, the same process. So what we try to do with separation of language is to ensure that children have a need to stay in the language and thus begin to think in the language over the course of their lesson, over the course of the day in which they're working with the language. So approximately, we must have a balance, and we call it a linguistic balance in the classrooms. Even though some of these classrooms could be, and in some places in Los Angeles they are, 100% Latino students, the classes are balanced by English-speaking children and Spanish-dominant children. And that linguistic balance is very important because you need the peer models of the language for each other. So if you don't have enough English speakers in your program, your Spanish speakers will not develop their proficiencies in English. If you don't have enough Spanish speakers in your program, your English speakers will not develop their proficiency in the language as well.
This slide is just for your information. She's already talked about the growth across the country. You can look at the number of states participating. But taking it back to here, to our district, we have 3 programs currently in existence in our schools. We have Los Padres in its 15th year, which is already a K through 6 program serving 257 students. Bronda Meadows in its 10th year, serving 258 students, and Lincoln in its 4th year of implementation, serving transitional kinder through 4th grade currently with 276 students. And as Ms. Molina talked about, the linguistic balance of the classes is very important. That is something we have struggled with historically. We've had not exactly the right mix of students, but when we take all these overall, we're definitely moving in that direction where we will have a greater balance, and we will have, I don't think it'll be 50-50, but about a third of the students would be Spanish dominant, a third English only, and a third would have some working knowledge of both languages, whether they're considered an English learner or an initially fluent student. There are a group of students that already come to school with very intermediate levels of English or above, and then as well have some working knowledge of Spanish. So that's just taking it into perspective for our own district, where we're currently serving a little under 1,000 students, about 900. I can't do the math right now, about 900 and some odd, but it is growing. And I would say that if we look at the program that grew the fastest was Lincoln, where about over 50% of the school is currently in the dual immersion program, and in the kinder, it's 70% of their students. And the same has happened. We do have a, not dual immersion, I'll call it an immersion preschool program there, because we did not decided that the program was dependent on the linguistic makeup. We wanted to have a service there for families that wanted Spanish as a primary language in their preschool experience. And since there's a fee-based, it was for whoever was going to participate in that program. That program has outpaced the English. We used to have just one session of Spanish. Now there's 3 sessions of families wanting Spanish immersion and just 1 session of the English program at that school site. So now Rosa will go back to the data. Let's jump back to this.
So the program goals, as we're saying, is really development of biliteracy for both groups of children. So with high levels of proficiency in the student's first language, as well as high levels of proficiency in the second. Those of you who are aware of the cognitive research on bilingualism, and we'll talk a little bit about it this evening, know that there are major cognitive advantages for children who are studying a language early in their lives, as well as we know that children who begin to study second language from the research called Funds of Knowledge before the age of 11 can actually develop native-like quality to the language. And that's why we know that in this country we start much too late, because most of the time we're starting formal instruction in high school at a time when students are most peer conscious and most where that window in time is coming to a close for them in terms of native-like proficiencies. We also know that students who are part of these programs demonstrate very high levels of positive cross-cultural attitudes. It is not enough for us that students move into the development of language, but then also know how to use it out in the real world. And so thus it affects their worldview in terms of the speakers of the language, the culture of the people that speak the language, but then also their ability to navigate through different cultures and different communities. Academic performance at both grade levels, for both groups of students is super important for us, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're doing as two-way programs across the state. So our work is about ensuring that students can become both bilingual, fluent in the language, can become academically capable in the language, literate, and that can also use the language in the real world, in their lives, and that's the goal of biculturalism. We know from, thank you. We know that the research from Cummins and the researchers who second language learning talk about this concept of the common underlying proficiency theory. And those of us who studied second language learning know that what happens with first language serves as the foundation for the development of the second. For so long, the media has tried to convince us that one language is an interference to the learning of the second. But when we look at brain studies and we look at years and years of research, we know that information can be acquired and learned in either language, and that the information then transfers from first language to the second. We call it the CUP theory, C-U-P. We also know that the most recent researchers from Canada, Bielostek and Wolf, Patricia Wolf, actually from here from California in 2008 and 2010, did major neurocognitive research pieces where they talked about the advanced levels of bilingual competence, not just the high school language competencies, demonstrate significant results in cognitive skills called executive control processes in the brain. Now this means that for our students who are really developing high levels of proficiency in both languages, that their attention span is broadened, that students have a better control in the use of both languages, that students are able to monitor and bridge one language with the other, and switch focus, and that they can basically sort through relevant and irrelevant information to activate both sides of the brain as they solve problems. Oftentimes we hear students using both languages in discussion, and we call that code switching in two-way immersion. But that code switching, if you look at the grammar behind that and the vernacular behind that, is actually a very sophisticated skill as students are moving and making actually grammatically significant bridges, correct bridges between both languages. And I think that what we all need to understand is going back to that concept that one language is not the interference for the learning of the second. And in fact, if we would begin 3 language study, we would begin students in studying 3 languages, that they have the very, very real capacity in learning those 3 languages starting at age 4 and 5 if they have a need to use the language. El Paso, Texas now has a program. He's led the school district. Sometime I need you to Google it. Alicia Chacon Multilingual School. The children are running an 80-10-10 program. 80% in Spanish, 10% in English, and 10% in the 3rd language, of which they choose French, Russian, German, Japanese, and Chinese. And by the time the students leave that 8th grade program, they're able to really move competently into programs at the high school where they've developed true multilingual proficiencies and capacity. What we also need to understand is the theory about versus what we call fluency versus proficiency. We often get fooled by English learners because their conversational levels grow very quickly. Students can become conversant in a language 2 to 3 years. And I know that having been a bilingual teacher myself years and years ago, a 4th grade teacher, it would fool us that the students actually sound very fluent by the time they're in 4th grade, but the minute they have to move into academic learning is when we realize they know neither language well. And so fluency is a 2 to 3 year process, but it needs to be paired with academic language proficiencies, the development of academic language, so that students then can actually connect both their oral, their capacity in the spoken word, with their brain power, with the academic language learning that's part of the brain. The national research trends, and we're going to talk about Dr. Catherine Lindholm Leary's work, who is the leading researcher in two-way. And in the first 4 programs in the state, followed us very, very closely in the implementation of our programs. And what she found, and what has now become the national trend data, it indicates that English, and in the English academic assessments, that English dominant students entering fluency, that can maintain their fluency in English, and they retain their English abilities, and in fact, they develop them further when they participate in two-way programs. There was always a fear when we started these programs, and we used to sit and watch this very carefully, that dual language, that children studying a second language would actually lose their abilities in English. And what we found is the absolute opposite was true. So students who are English dominant not only develop second language fluencies, but they also grow in their abilities in their own language, in the English language, as they move through the grade levels. There are many people that say that when I learned, when I studied Spanish or I studied French, is when I really studied the English language. And I think that's what really happens with students who are English fluent. The native-speaking, Spanish-speaking children in dual language also develop strong English oral skills. And there's now research that is showing that they're rated fluent by 3rd grade, and that by 3rd grade, they showed no significant differences in oral English proficiency between themselves and English-speaking children in monolingual programs. And so their fluency is not the issue. For English learners, we keep working on academic proficiencies in both languages, and we know that that gap closes at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for our English learners, or the students that we refer to as native speakers. Now, I just want to, let me go through this variance. So Mary talked about the program she was part of, the Shigurov, and that was what they called a 50-50 program, half the day in Spanish, in French, half the day in English. And most of the 50-50 programs are what we call foreign language options. Most of the programs offer English speaking, and they're usually intended for English speaking children. The Canadian programs, many of them were 50-50 programs, but they were intended for English-speaking Canadians to learn French. So the two-way model is the model that was adapted here in California and in the Pacific Northwest and also in the Southwest to incorporate what they felt was going to be a significant factor, and that is the native speaker of the language. The Canadians, years later, felt that they had missed the boat because they had not included French-speaking Canadians to be part of their dual language effort. So theirs was truly a 50-50 program where half the day was in English, half the day was in Spanish, and the one complaint that they have, and they continue to have today, is that their children do not sound native-like in their French. They speak Frenchese, they call it, which is a learned French. It's not a native-like French. And it's because they're not working with native speakers of the language. We have never seen that in two-way. Our English speakers can come right in behind us and say, Señora Molina, ¿no está el baño? And you would think you were speaking to a Spanish speaker because they're native-like, the native-like quality of their language as a result of working with native speakers. Okay, let's go here. Academic achievement. You want me to keep going? Okay. All right. No, Thomas and Collier is another big researcher in 1997 and 2002. Analyzed over 700,000 student records from 5 school districts in the United States to track the long-term educational benefit for English learners, the native speakers in these programs. And they found that when programs are implemented well, and there's fidelity to the development of to the program design, that there's a significant program effect that is apparent by late high school. The researchers also found that the length of time in the program was crucial, that our students needed to be in the program. We first thought 4 to 7 years, and what we discovered is that the gap began to close at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Students really needed to be in the program all the way through middle school, so that they entered high school and they were able to access the advanced placement courses and possibly pick up, as we said earlier, the third language option or Spanish for special purposes. So we know that this research that we're about to engage in a formal statewide study that shows that Latino boys who are more likely to drop out of high school when they're part of a dual language program, that they're able to, that the dropout rate is greatly reduced, and they outperform English dominant children who have just had a monolingual experience. So we really look at those factors and try to replicate these models in places where students are highly at risk of not graduating from high school. Okay, and then the next piece is basically a demonstration. Can you do it? Yes. We call this the tattoo. We've always thought that we need to know this so well because students who are native speakers, when they're in different types of programs, we start to see that the two-way bilingual immersion students and the dual language students outperform all of the rest of the models that are in place, and that the program least effective is a program that you're going to find in many, many schools, and that's what we call the ESL pullout. That we know over time that English learners do not do well when they're pulled out of core program. They never catch up. And so that produces a large dropout rate of our students who are native speakers of another language. And so we know that over time, when we give students sufficient time to study a second language and become literate in both, that your two-way and your late exit bilingual programs are your most effective. All right.
As Rosa said, there's variances in the model. The district, when the program began at Los Padres 15 years ago, it was here out of a grant that the district received from the Department of Education. And at that time, they did extensive research. They just didn't pick it out of anywhere. They decided what would be the best program for the students here. And they chose the 90-10 model, which, as you can see there, means that 90% of the day for the students in kindergarten and first grade is in Spanish, and 10% in English, and those percentages going up to where it's 50-50 in 5th and 6th grade. So they're maintaining that all the way through. Again, this is research-based, and while many people question how is a child going to learn English if they are native Spanish speakers and 90% of their day is in Spanish, they do. And the same it yields, as Rosa said, it yields the strongest results for both groups of students. The English-only students have more likelihood and greater success in the target language of Spanish in this model, and the English learners also have the greatest success in both languages in this model. And we're working with Rosa as we open the other programs. Like I said, one of the challenges here in our district over time with this program was interest from all linguistic groups and participation. That day has come, and we do have now a significant and substantial amount of interest from our English-speaking community to enroll their students in this program so that we can get to the linguistic balance we need for the classrooms, and then go back and make sure that we are not straying from the research-based model, and that we're using the strategies that have been shown to be effective and keeping as true to a program model as we can, so that we can yield the results that we're sharing and seeing with people here that research has told us that we can. This, and as Rosa alluded to, this is not our district at all. We are not this district. We are not a K-12 district. But she's going to share with you a pathway that another district has in place for kinder through 12th grade. And we began a conversation with the high school district last spring. Just met with them again. They actually initiated it initially. We've had necessary parents here, and we tried many years ago, back when Los Padres' program had its first group of 6th graders exiting our district and entering middle school, to try to say, could there be an option for them to continue academic Spanish studies while they're in middle school until they have the opportunity to again participate in the language program in high school. We were never sending enough students forward to the same middle school for them to really take it seriously. As it's growing and they're hearing pressure from educators in the community around to look at that, we're meeting and hopefully designing a pathway. Our high school district here was one of the first in the state to pass a board resolution and to acknowledge and to provide the seal of biliteracy for their students. So they have always been pro in that area, and the current board is very supportive. Before it became legislation here in the state, they were one of the very early adopters that had a board resolution, and we're going to put it on their kids' diplomas, so their students' diplomas. So they're very open, and we're definitely moving forward in that conversation so that there can be an articulated program for our students. But Rosa's going to share what it might look like for a student K-12 here in the city of Salinas.
So the actual Seal of Biliteracy Award actually begins at the elementary level. So after 6 years of study, the students receive the first award. And that first award is what we call the recognition of biliteracy. It's important for us to know that this is predicated on the mastery of grade level proficiencies in both languages, that students are in fact getting close to grade level performance in both languages, and that we're moving as many students as we can toward redesignation to fluent status. And so many, and we're talking about our native speakers. So it usually falls about a third in 4th grade, a third in 5th grade, and the next third in 6th grade. And that's why this is so important for us to understand that this is a multi-year piece. At this particular school district, which is Newman Crow's Landing in the Central Valley, they just started their program 2 years ago. And right away, they started out with their map so that the community knows that when you make a multi-year commitment, that the middle school program will be at Yolo Middle School, and then we'll move on to Orestimba High School, I think that's the way you say it, and that by the end of either their freshman, sophomore year, the students then qualify for that seal of biliteracy. Because they're going to, what's happening in Long Beach, what's happening in San Jose, in San Francisco, is that many of our students leave high school ready to take the first AP course. And 8th graders at Patrick Henry in Long Beach were actually given the AP exam and 80% pass with 4s and 5s. So students know the content, they know the information. The marker for us is AP Spanish Literature. And that students are sophisticated enough to handle the content that they have to study in order to be able to take that. But that's a choice. And we also know that students entering the universities can get 8 credits of foreign language credit for having a seal of biliteracy and passing those AP courses. And so it's significant to this college-going culture that you're trying to establish as a school district to give students the advantage of studying a second language that's this formal and this well organized. We plan to come in front of you in the month of May and share with you the master plan for your school district. We're engaged with the task force at this point, putting all the elements together, and we hope to bring it to you for review. And it's not necessarily an approval piece because it's a curriculum piece, but it's a review piece for the board. And so it'll give you all of the information about the implementation of the two-way program for within Salinas Elementary School District but it also then outlines for the future, the development of this program, what it needs to look like at every grade level, as well as the implications for the middle school and the high school. So, is there anything else that I'm missing here?
No, I just want to say that the certificate of biliteracy word lettering is my technology for transferring the graphic from one, so they're certainly not going to give a certificate of biliteracy with the Y at the end. I thought I'd fix it on one side. I'm driving me crazy right now. And then just the last slide, that was just for your knowledge to know the number of programs across the country that are acknowledging and providing their students upon graduation from high school with the recognition of something similar as what the state of California has done with the seal of biliteracy. So we're here for questions, for more information.
Yes, we have a couple of questions.
I just have one question. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming, and what an honor it is to have you believe that we're in and come here for us. So thank you so much. How does the phonics program work in the 90-10 model in kindergarten? Because the phonics is different in Spanish than in
The students are actually doing all of their language arts instruction in Spanish. So the introduction to the phonics program is Spanish phonetic instruction. The English literacy actual formal instruction starts in 3rd grade.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, transfer.
Yeah. The orthography of the Spanish language lends itself for children to be able to transfer and decode from the Spanish language to the English. It really is probably the nicest language to be able to have that take place. But during the academic English portion of the day, students are developing oral language proficiencies. They're starting all the pre-reading skills as they would if they were in an English-only classroom, both groups of students. But they're each other's language models, and so they're really working on academic content to make sure that they're not missing any stage of schooling and within the Common Core and all the components that are part of that. So we don't even call it ELD time, we call it academic English time for both groups of students.
So the phonics piece transfers over is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
I have two, excuse me, I have two questions. The first question is on how we're working with the high school district. I mean, should we have they have similar programs, so at the end you get your seal of biliterate. I mean, so are we doing that?
Yeah. We did meet with them, and they are mapping out and looking. They've presented several options. They again want to come see the programs so that we're on target, so that we're sending the students with the requisite skills they'll need to be successful, and that they're putting rigorous enough programs in place for the students. So that conversation, we just met again last week, and they're going to be coming to our district after spring break and definitely making sure that we're making an articulated program that meets the needs of the students we'd be sending and that their other feeder districts would be sending as well in the future. So they're very aware, and they're not wanting to put in something too simple, and they want to make sure that they're still allowing students to have options so that this doesn't have to take up their elective course, their language in middle school. That they're trying to look at how the difficult thing will be credentialing, because it's difficult to find a content area teacher who also has the bilingual authorization. But ideally the students would have one of their contents, like say social studies, in Spanish, so that it wouldn't relegate them to only having their Spanish language instruction during their elective time, and they could still take band or whatever the other options may be. So it's not simple, and we all acknowledge that one of the biggest barriers will be the credentialing element to find the instructors. So they are working with their Spanish language department, and they've also been over the years putting in different programs to try in the high school level, not in their middle school, but they want to actually start moving forward even before our critical mass of students would arrive at the high school district level, to look at courses for Spanish for native speakers and different things, because the students exiting this program, a Spanish for native speakers who just have the oral proficiency wouldn't be the appropriate course, because they would have the academic reading and writing. So, yeah, and she's going to weigh in too. She was in it.
Well,
She's gonna wait.
yeah, I have one more. Have you, because now you're saying, I mean, on this program with the whole, have you guys looked, or can you present the next time, districts that are similar to ours, we're K-6, and then, let's say what'd you say, Long Beach and San Jose, do they have?
Paso Robles.
Right, do they have the middle high school? How do they do it? And if they're successful, why can't we present it to the high school, copy, or plagiarize, or whatever we want? Use, why make a clone? Why break a wheel or make a new wheel for a wheel?
No, I think what's very interesting for us to understand as we're talking about this with the high school level is the high school system of teaching a second language is what we call grammar-based approaches.
Right.
And the elementary level of teaching a second language is what they call communicatively based approach. So communicatively based meets grammar based in high school. And so we need to have a lot of room on the part of the high schools to be able to incorporate the students who are fluent in the language, fluent in 2 languages, but also literate in the languages. And they need to reconstruct here the mindset about where we put the kids. That's what has to change.
I think the whole key to it is not necessarily the high school and us, it's all the middle schools where, because that's where it'll fall to the wayside, right?
That's exactly right.
And then we have our kids with no middle school, and then they go up in the high school and they get back in because there are languages. And so how do we fix that?
Well, we don't leave it as
Well,
an option.
we don't, but
We don't
right.
leave it as an option. So, and that is, by the way, what's happened in many, many programs all over California, which is there's an assumption that the kids can keep their skills for 3 years by not, or 2 years, 2 in yours, but 3 in a lot of our junior highs and middle schools. And then they go into high school, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, they have to go in Spanish too. I mean, so 7 years lost. 7 years of second language study lost. So it's just a real misunderstanding of us. We would never do that in English. Why do we do that in the second language, right? So we have to really kind of think through these pieces and ensure that students have the right pathways, and that we're taking away all of the issues that prevent us from having that coursework all the way through.
So so essentially what you're saying, we have to come up with it's almost like we have to do the work for the high school district to go, here, we're presenting you all right.
Yeah, and I would just say the meeting we had with them was very collaborative, and they're very open for that, because they understand too that the groundwork for us building the climate to have students continue in that program is going to happen here. So, do you know what I mean? We're going to be doing the selling, so we want to make sure they're going to offer what it is we're telling parents.
They're going to be doing the buying.
Yes. So they're going to be doing the producing. But they definitely are very open and want to go see other models, and they're not trying to design it from scratch. Is what came from it.
Thank you.
Just one last question. Do we have a waiting list for our dual immersion programs?
We do currently, and it's something in the task force meeting that we were looking at and trying to make sure we also have, as in our English program, several combination classes. So we're definitely trying to be more centralized and proactive to get information to families that might want to transfer between schools, so that we can balance our numbers and then provide the program for all families that are interested. And the numbers have been growing, so we can do our best estimating at times. But yes, we have had waiting lists, and we have had students that have not been able to begin. We have allowed students to begin in first grade when there's openings, and in grades past that, it's more for native Spanish speakers who have a little level of literacy. For a native English speaker to start after the first semester of first grade is a bit of a challenge, and not what we would recommend, and not what we've done. So.
Any questions, Kim?
I was wondering if there's a waiting list. Is it mainly Spanish-speaking people who are on the waiting list, or is it?
It's a combination of both. It depends on the school, and currently the program does not it's like any other program in the district. For the most part, we don't have transportation from one school to the other to provide for that. So at one school site, we might have a waiting list of Spanish speakers, and another school site, a waiting list of English speakers. We always do I do a lot of parent outreach to preschools and everything here locally in parent meetings. I always tell families, your odds are greatest if you're an English speaker to apply at this school. Your odds are greatest if you're a Spanish speaker. But most all of our, with Lincoln being the exception because the boundaries are so limited and it has so many kids on intras and inters, but Bronda Meadows and Los Padres have enough interest in their communities to fill their classrooms largely with their neighborhood students. So we're working at creating a better process so that parents, if there is a space somewhere, it's not sitting empty if somebody would like to take that space.
Yeah. Any more questions from the board members? Okay, we have one hand up, one question.
I had a couple of
I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Take the podium, please.
I just had a couple of questions. Kind of more information about our district. We got a lot of national research, but I'm wondering what the outcomes in Salinas City are after 15 years. And I was kind of more curious of what the balance of native Spanish speakers and English speakers is in each of the 3 schools we have it at now. I'm kind of hearing that it's a little, they're different at the different sites, but kind of more of a percentage.
I can't address all of it, but I will say that part of it, when we had the last CST scores, which is what we looked at, in terms of how are they producing in English, academics on par with our other students in the district. Our results for the programs at that time at Bronda, Meadows, and Los Padres were the only 2 schools that had data the last time we did a whole analysis. They were outperforming all students in the district and definitely more successful for English learners, and definitely more successful in the number of English learners who are reaching the criteria to exit the EL program for reclassification. As Mrs. Molina said, a 3rd and 4th grade, a 3rd and 5th, a 3rd and 6th, we have continually seen at Los Padres that 98% of the students are reaching reclassification criteria before leaving our district, and that is not what we are seeing across the district for all English learners. So the results have been positive. That when the percentage of students, I would say that are, well, it's moved. Like as I said, Los Padres has struggled to attract the English dominant community to that school. I think just by geography and different reasons. It's a PI year, whatever million school, it was a state school, but within that they've always maintained a very strong program. Bronda Meadows has been back and forth at different times. It had more of a linguistic balance, some years better than others. The program at Lincoln opened with, as we knew, too many English-only students at that time, but again, it was needing to finally have the community interest and to offer a program. But if you go right now, their 4th grade student linguistic balance looks nothing like the kindergarten linguistic balance. So as in its 4th year, the current kindergarten class is one of the most linguistically balanced programs we have, with actually almost 50%. And so each year, the goal has always been to get the program balanced. But when Lincoln opened, it was the programs that were known in the Spanish-speaking community were Los Padres and Bronda Meadows. So doing that work, and so both way the education across the different families wanting to participate of where the programs are, and the great strength that the whole program brings, whether it's at Los